Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof, notwithstanding my breaking news Georgian election update. First part thereof for the 27th of October 2024. We're going to start with another significantly high list of losses for the Russians. 1,440 personnel lost is incredibly high again, well over the 1,300 upper end of the range that I often talk about, 1,000 to 1,300, which is itself a really high range given the context of the rest of the war. So days when it was 700 earlier on in the war, we were like, oh, that's a crazy day for the Russians. Then it started getting up to 1,000. You're like, okay, 1,000, that is insane. And then we've had like not dropping realistically below 1,000 for the sort of 6 months or whatever it's been. And the high has been sort of 1,300, and then we saw 2 days of 1,700 odd at different points. We've had a couple of days of 1,600 odd in this last week. We've got a record-breaking 7-day and 30-day rolling average that we've just had. And now we have another 1,440 personnel lost yesterday. 4 tanks slipping back down there, but 23 armoured personnel vehicles still above the daily average. 39 artillery systems, just about double the daily average. So that's still somewhat significant there. And then 100 vehicles and fuel tanks. That is an incredibly high number in that category. One piece of special equipment. That can be quite a variable category because the remit is pretty, well, I think it's somewhat wide, but also a little bit unknown as to what is in the category of special equipment. Same can be said for vehicles and fuel tanks, because there will be a little bit of a potential overlap between vehicles and fuel tanks, vehicles in a kind of real loose sense, and then special equipment, which often are vehicles. Okay, so a demining tank or a vehicle with a radar, sort of counter-battery radar planted on top, is that going to be special equipment, or is that a general vehicle, etc., etc.? So anyway, whatever, the Russians have lost heavily in a couple of these categories, particularly personnel. So things are very difficult for the Russians. However, things are really, really challenging for the Ukrainians on the front line. Vuhledar is a bit of a disaster. The Russians have broken through in that bottom right-hand corner of the front line in the southern Donetsk front. We have really challenging moments there, as well as in Selidove, which is on the southern part of the Pokrovsk sector, where the Russians have basically taken control of Selidove. So Russians are having success on the front line, probably as a result of losing all of these people and equipment. So the question is always, is that gain worth the losses? And I don't know. I guess we'll tell at some point in the future. History will judge. Okay, there have been lots of claims regarding Russian aerial losses. So it started off with a helicopter supposedly crashing in the Kerch Strait, according to Fighter Bomber, who is a pretty reliable source, but it was unclear as to what that was. So a source associated with the Russian military aviation reports that a Russian helicopter crashed in Kerch Strait, so Fighter Bomber. So far, Russian sources are confused as to whether it's a Ka-52, that's the Alligator attack helicopter, or a Ka-27, which is, I think, the naval helicopter that does quite a bit of, has a bit of a wide remit itself on the sort of Black Sea. I think it can be used to take out things like unmanned sea vehicles, as well as do sort of I have a feeling sort of electronic warfare-y sort of radar stuff as well. I don't know. Anyway, one of those two types of helicopters. Then we heard that it was a Mi-28. So neither of those two helicopters. That's a single rotor blade, rather than having these twin sort of the ones that counteract against each other. So you don't need so much of the tail blades, as you can see there. Instead of having that to stop it spinning around, if you've got a rotor blade going really quickly round one way, then you can have the whole body of the helicopter then spinning around the other way. So you have the rotor blades that works vertically to stop that happening, or you get this helicopter with the twin rotor blades that go in opposite directions, but still allow it to lift into the air. But anyway, so this one here is a Mi-28 attack helicopter, different to the Ka-52. But it could have been that type of helicopter crash. And then judging, the Special Correspondent Cat says later, judging by a bit of a shady comment by Russian sources, the Mi-28 was not the only Russian military aviation lost yesterday. Russian sources reported the crew of a Mi-28 helicopter is dead, but at the same time, those wished a quick recovery to some surviving pilot. Other less popular Russian sources hint that a Russian Su-25 crashed somewhere, but the pilot managed to survive the crash. So, who knows exactly what happened? But there are now reports that a Su-25 went down yesterday. So that would be really good news for Ukraine, obviously. But actually, okay, so now another Russian channel claims that Mi-28 crashed and not a Ka-52 or Ka-27, says PS01, so adding to that those voices. As long as they crash, we rejoice, he says. But then there was another helicopter that crashed in the Russian Kirov region. 3 people reported dead. Mi-2 helicopter. And in fact, Tim, there is evidence of this as well. So this pretty much did happen. Another aircraft disaster in Russia. Again, one has to wonder about the sanctions and safety. 4 bodies, actually, rather than 3, have been found after a Mi-2 helicopter crash in Kirov. Wreckage was found in the forest near the village of Belenki. All 4 victims are thought to be doctors. So there you go. That has happened. So yesterday, potentially, it looks like 2 helicopters have gone down and a Su-25. Verification is obviously going to be difficult to come by. Now, lots of video footage coming out of huge numbers of losses for the Russians. But of course, remember, with each of these losses, there are territorial gains often. 95th Air Assault Brigade eliminated an entire assault group from Russia's 155th Marine Brigade and the Akhmat Special Unit. So this is up in the Kursk region. And the 155th is having a little bit of a hard time up there, as they attempted to seize Ukrainian positions in the Kursk region. Several Kadyrov fighters were also captured. Then we have this happening. I mean, this is a massive explosion of just a Tiger IMV, infantry mobility vehicle of some sort here. The reason I have linked this, because, you know, who cares about an APC type vehicle getting blown up by a drone? But this is an interesting one. So you have this vehicle here, then the drone lands underneath it, or sort of blows up here, but there's not too much of a significant explosion of this drone, right? It sort of puffs like that, and then it kind of goes out. Okay, there's a bit of smoke, and then that's that. And then you're left with the vehicle. And then there's this delay. And then, as you can see, all the smoke's gone. That's done its thing. There's no fire. There's nothing else here. So what I'm asking from you guys who know your onions, would that explosion have caused some kind of pressure, intense pressure inside the vehicle, such that there were munitions inside the vehicle? So the idea here is that it's loaded with explosives, that vehicle, according to Sarin anyway. And then you get this delay, and then bang, it absolutely explodes. So what triggers explosives to do that? If there's no direct fire, though we can't see inside, one presumes that explosion of the drone on the bottom part of the chassis or something like that hasn't caused, but it could have done. We can't see inside, but I'm just interested to see what might trigger explosives in such a way, and then those explosives are catastrophic for that vehicle. And at the end, there's like nothing left of the vehicle, pretty much. I mean, that's it. That's what's left of the vehicle, and that's what it did look like, and that's what it ends up looking like. Wow. That is a huge difference there. That's a massive explosion in that vehicle. Anyway, what else is of note? So a couple of people, or lots of people showing this video. You can see here there is a large number of vehicles coming down in this column. So this is a really sizable attack in the Vremsky Ledge west of Vuhledar. So this is in the Vuhledar area where the Russians have broken through the Ukrainian substantial lines, right? I think they've got through. They've made these massively quick advances outside of Vuhledar. So we'll come on to that in a second anyway. In the other section when Andrew Perpetua casts his opinion over this. The units of the separate presidential brigade destroy enemy equipment and hit about 20 pieces of equipment. This is a really substantial set of losses for the Russians, but of course they still make those gains, don't they? Massive Russian mechanized attack. Out of 14 heavy armored pieces, 6 were destroyed and the rest fled. So yeah, there again, you can see it's not going to play it. You can see lots of this kind of footage. It gives you a sense of what is going on on the front lines with the amount of equipment that is destroyed routinely by the Ukrainians there. So a lot more Russian equipment destroyed, but they are making those territorial gains. Then we have a heavy night bomber. I'm including this one. You can go and check these all out. They're all linked in the description below. Destroys the two S7 Pion. These are, or Pion, 203mm self-propelled howitzers. These are big pieces of kit. These are basically, I mean, you can see the size of that barrel there. It's a huge self-propelled howitzer. That barrel starts there and goes all the way back to there. So it's the loss of 2 significant howitzers for the Russians there. But it's also the use of these octocopters at night, or hexacopters, where they are really effective in these kind of bombing raids of specific pieces of equipment. And we are seeing more and more of these entered into things like Andrew Perpetua's loss list. We don't have Andrew's loss list for today, but we are seeing a lot of vampire drones, as they're often called, or Baba Yagas, being added to these lists. They are being very effective and particularly used at night. And the reason they use at night predominantly is because they are quite loud. Obviously, the more rotor blades you have and the bigger the rotor blades, the louder you're going to be. And also, literally, the physically bigger you are, the more able you are to be seen. So both visually and orally, these are quite vulnerable. So that's why they get used at night. Put half-decent thermal imaging on it, and you can use them to just go and wreak havoc on the Russian rear. So this will be somewhat behind the lines. You know, these have a huge range, the Pion, if they're working well, and then, you know, they're not going to be sort of 1 or 2 kilometers behind the contact line. They're going to be somewhat back. Okay, I showed you and I'm pretty sure this is a different one, but it looks very similar. We're building an air defense system in Ukraine using drones, says Serhiy Sternenko. To protect the Ukrainian sky faster, please support us with a donation. And Sternenko does a lot of fundraising for stuff we have Wild Hornets is becoming more and more of I really must get the main guy from Wild Hornets on, actually, because I've contacted him by WhatsApp. His man has put me through to him, but he's not answered my WhatsApps, and I think he's probably insanely busy. But anyway, here we have an interceptor drone being spotted by another drone, and it has definitely an incendiary device on board, an explosive device on board, and properly takes out that drone, reconnaissance drone. But look behind it, the automatic parachute still kicks in after it has been absolutely mauled, and that will fall to the ground without being able to continue its duty. So good stuff there. Interesting to see that. We have a truck loaded with a drone, possibly a Shahid or something, blown up in a Volgograd region. So this is in Russia. And this, I mean, really does explode. For this to be caught on camera, I don't know if this was sabotage or what happened here. Just PS01 says awaiting details. I mean, it'd be great if that is sabotage. Someone says it looks like an old video. No, it's from today. I've not seen this video before, so I'm pretty sure this is a new video. Interesting. And then we have this, and I want to know more about this. Jason J. Smart, who is with the Kiev Post, says for days, anarchy has spread over Chelyabinsk in Russia as locals set fire to businesses and commit other acts of social delinquency. Where are the authorities? Russia, which is occupying Ukraine, doesn't have enough soldiers at home to put down the riots. Now, I've not heard anything else about this, so take it with a pinch of salt. But this is exactly the sort of activity you want to take place in Russia. You want social discontent. You want some kind of uprising to take place. This kind of thing, it sounds weird, but this gives me joy because it gives Ukraine some kind of hope as potentially Russia starts falling apart at the seams. Now, I don't know the details here, so this could be completely overblown and not a thing. But it's certainly a thing I think that Ukraine needs. So I have to look into that a little bit more closely. Right, moving on to distant strikes. 80 Shaheeds again sent. This is relentless. The Russians are building these at a pace, as I keep saying, and they are throwing them at Ukraine in massive waves every single night at the moment. There are like 2 days recently where I was like, oh, it could mean that they've had issues with stockpiles taken out, as one night there was 0 and I think the next night there was 17, and then straight away it just got back to sort of 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 type thing, and it's just relentless. 80 sent last night, 41 was shot down, 32 were lost due to electronic warfare, which is becoming increasingly significant. That's 73 out of 81 flew back to Belarus, 74. So 6 drones got through. And of course, as I keep saying, 6 drones one night, 5 drones the next, 3 the next, 5 the next, 10 the next. That builds up. You multiply that over, I don't know what the average of drones getting through might be. But if it's something like 5 a night, 5 times 30, 1 month sees 150 drones get through. That is a problem. So yeah, we need to watch out for thinking that all is well if the interception rate is really good percentage wise, because that can belie the reality that a little and often makes for a lot. Okay, there was a large-scale fire in Odessa. Sounds of detonations can also be heard. Reason unknown. I don't know what happened yesterday, but this is really significant. So a massive fire in Odessa, and that's definitely a worrying state of affairs. Don't know what was hit. Don't know if it's ammunition or air defense or I mean, it looks like a wider place. It looks like some kind of facility there, but certainly massive explosion or big old fire going on there. So that is not good news. Odessa was hit big time. Okay, and then in Russia, Lipetsk military airbase was under attack again, I believe, last night. PS01 says third attempt over the last 24 hours. There were also attempts about a week ago. So this is something, yeah, I reported that. That was the video I showed you a week ago. This, if it happened last night, is potentially another example that there are strikes that are taking place all the time that we just don't hear about. This is one that we just about hear about. The claim is actually it's happened 3 times over the last few days. Third attempt in 24 hours. And it took place last week as well. So there are these strikes, even though I might not report them on a daily basis, just because we don't know about them. And an air alert in Ryazan in Russia. Residents report a fire at the area of the oil refinery there. Again, so we just, that's arguably fairly significant, but don't know any more details other than there's a fire near the oil refinery in Ryazan. Almost certainly from strikes. So Ryazan oil refineries glowing after explosions were heard. Again, says Pier01. Additional footage there from Ryazan. As you can see, something is on fire, or a couple of things potentially there on fire. So that could be good news for the Ukrainians there. And indeed, we now hear from no reports that a fire broke out at the Transneft Druzhba dispatch station in Novonikolskoye, Tambov region, following a reported Ukrainian drone strike. So that could be on oil or hydrocarbons infrastructure. The possibly Transneft is that gas rather than oil? Yeah, those are gas storage tanks. So yeah, that is. Again, potential success for Ukrainian strikes last night, but very little detail. Interesting footage here, and worrying actually. So War Vehicle Tracker reports pretty rare and the first of its kind footage of a Russian Shahed drone, Shahed 136, and with an onboard camera. So we don't often see any footage from Shaheds. Claim to have a Ukrainian SIM card. So what they often do is they use SIM cards to navigate around. It's almost as if this is a mobile phone that's flying through, and it uses its pings off the mobile phone mast to be able to navigate where it is. The Ukrainians, when we hear that a drone has been sent back to Belarus, there are thoughts that that is as a result of spoofing such drones by confusing it with where the mobile phones are, by changing the codes on the mobile phone masts. So it thinks it's here, but actually that's a mobile phone mast that's over there. So it turns right to go over there, and you spoof it into going into sort of Russia or Belarus, and then it kind of falls out the sky or does what, I don't know what happens to it when they do that. But so this is one, however, that is successful, and we can see it striking a 110 kilovolt transformer substation near Sumy. This is incredibly problematic, obviously, for the Ukrainians. So when I talk about five drones getting through overnight, right? If all 5 drones are doing something like this, that's a problem. So here's just one drone. Now I don't know what the actual damage it did in the end, but you've got a large substation there that the drone goes and hits. I mean, it cuts out there because obviously it goes into its terminal phase. But this is definitely a problem. So what else does he say? The last seconds seem to show that the camera isn't for guiding, but for surveillance. Interesting. And just to remind you, the ramifications of striking into cities, as the Russians do every night. Maria was killed by a Russian drone attack on Kiev last night. She was only 15, was a leader at school, and had so many plans. Excruciating pain. R.I.P. Angel, says Mariana Betzer. Just the human loss of this war as a result of needless, violent invasion by Russia. Anyone that excuses this on account of, say, NATO expansionism or some kind of nonsense like that needs to get their head checked. Seriously needs their head checked. Okay, some people have asking me for territorial changes. I'm going to try and remember. Poulet Volant, who's a French mapper, uses actually Andrew Perpetua and other sources to do his own mapping, has excellent mapping, but also does a difference over a week. So this is week 43 and of 2024, and says that Ukraine has made 0 gains and has lost 196.42 square kilometers. Russia has made 167.79 square kilometers of gains. And in the Kursk region, the Ukrainians have gained 10.99 square kilometers and lost 32.42 square kilometers. So they have made some gains in Kursk, but they've lost more than they've gained. There are some claims that they have made some gains in, where is it? Here it is. So in Zhuralevka, which is Belgorod Oblast, you've got those 2 Kursk sectors. Sorry, you've got the 2 Belgorod sectors north of Kharkiv. Well, actually Kharkiv sectors, because it's the Russians attacking from Belgorod into Kharkiv, Lipsy and Vovchansk. And then just to the left, just to the west of the Lipsy sector, you've got an area where the Ukrainians have attacked into Russia. So this is the border here. And you've got this town that the Russians have been under a lot of pressure in. The Ukrainians have attacked north there and taken some land. But again, that's minimal. You compare that to what's happened in Vuhledar, and yeah, it's huge what's happened in Vuhledar. So Russian forces raised their flag in the center of Bohoyavlenka, north of Vuhledar. This marks a significant advance. In recent days, Russia started an offensive in the Shakhtarska, Novoyukrenka, Bohoyavlenka sector. And this is, so there's Vuhledar. They've just absolutely marching through the fields and breaking through defensive lines. Andrew Perpetua says Russians have effectively broken through the line of defense that was behind Vuhledar by getting into the middle of Bohoyavlenka. This defense line I was hoping could last 2 to 3 months, but was lost in 1, largely due to extremely heavy bombing and horribly insufficient preparation by Ukraine. In essence, Ukraine spent 2 years defending their forward positions. This is kind of what they did in Avdiivka, to buy time and use that time doing nothing to prepare the next line of defense. There really is no excuse, so on and so forth. So he goes and has a big old rant about that. Do your job and build those defenses, and it didn't seem to happen. As well, what do we have? Yeah, Seledove. So Seledove seems to have been taken now by the Russians. On the front line in Donetsk region, unconfirmed reports of more targeting of civilians by Russia's invaders. It looks like war criminals' favourite activity of human safari has arrived in partially occupied Seledove. So what is happening is that the drones are, just like in Kherson, they are targeting civilians who are still hanging on in Seledove. Shootings of civilians are taking place in Seledove. After the drones flew over the controlled areas of the city, especially the private sector, corpses in civilian clothes were seen in the streets. Despite the fact that these areas of the city were not affected by active hostilities, that is, these killings took place already after the enemy took control of these areas. Pilots note that there are many such corpses in the city. At the moment, the expletives are not allowed to advance beyond the railway in the Vishnevo region. So I'll do a mapping update later, and we'll see how far the Russians have got. Russia can afford to fund the war in Ukraine for several more years, supported by massive oil revenues and the shortcomings of Western sanctions, according to the Washington Post. So that's bad news for Ukraine, that Russia should be able to support the war for a couple of years. That's broadly in line with what was thought anyway. So actually it's nothing particularly new. Now, the head of South Korean National Security Agency has agreed to consider a proposal to launch missile strikes on North Korean troops arriving in Russia, voiced a member of the ruling party. The day before, the South Korean online publication New Delhi published a photo of the phone of one of the members of the Parliamentary Defence Committee from the ruling party. In it, Han Ki-ho writes that, quote, if we can reach an agreement with Ukraine, it would be good to bomb and launch missile strikes on units of the puppet North Korean army in order to inflict losses on them and then feed these losses to the DPRK in a psychological war. To this, the head of the National Security Agency replies, yeah, we'll consider it. I've already held an emergency meeting today to develop measures. Han Ki-ho also suggests that Shin Won-sik send liaison officers to Ukraine, to which the representative of the presidential administration replies that that's what will be done. This could be good news for Ukraine. If North Korea it's bad news for the world because this is an expansion of the war. North Korea gets involved, South Korea gets involved, and you've got a proxy. We talk about proxy war of NATO and Russia, right? This is ending up being a proxy war of the Korean Peninsula. Unbelievable that we're at this point in 2024. Absolutely incredible. And be under no illusion as to whose bloody fault it is. It is Putin's fault. He's the one that invaded. So don't go around blaming other people. And don't go like, well, he was justified in... As soon as you start saying he's justified in invading and thus doing 150,000 war crimes, you are justifying... I don't want to go down my religious philosophy here, the biblical exegesis. There's a really... I wrote a very long piece on slavery in the Bible, right? And I said, and the same with slavery and genocide. As soon as you start justifying, as soon as you start like jumping through hoops to say, genocide or slavery was that was. As soon as you start going down the route of trying to justify that, you've lost the argument. You've lost the argument. And there's a real similarity here. In fact, there's an article in that I could write. But I'll dig out the quote that I started one of my articles with because it's absolutely on point for this, which is as soon as you start justifying Putin's genocidal intentions by NATO expansionism or this, you've just lost the moral argument. I'm sorry. In my book anyway. It's a lot more complicated than that, and I'll have to do a lot more arguing. It's the way I'm selling it there is very sort of veneer. Right. Because moral philosophy is a quagmire. Okay, this is not to do with Ukraine, but there are lessons that can be learnt here for both sides, actually, because this is what Russia should have done, and they didn't do. Although it might have been somewhat harder, but they should have spent 3 months doing this rather than a couple of days doing this and then send your army in, because, of course, they weren't really doing war. And the whole point about the Russian invasion is it was a special military operation and not a war, and it only accidentally became a war when, against their predictions, Ukraine actually pushed back. So Israel reportedly destroyed all the radars of Russian S-400 and S-300 systems in Iran, leaving Iran's entire airspace blinded to future attacks. So apparently the Israelis did these huge response attacks last night, just over the last 36 hours or whatever it is, and some Iranian response have been like, is that all you got type thing? But I think that's a bit of psyops there, because what Iran did was, I think, pretty amazing. Now, what Israel did. Yeah, I'm not getting involved in justification of what Israel does and Iran does, etc., etc. This isn't a moral or political evaluation of the war that Israel is involved in. This is merely a military tactical thing based on SIAD and DIAD. So suppression of enemy air defense and destruction of enemy air defense, which is exactly what you need if you want to go and then do a land invasion or win a war or whatever. You need to destroy radar and air defense facilities. Now, apparently, Israel has crippled Iran's missile production as well as crippled their air defense system. And they have been flying over Syria, I think, with impunity, which is an indication that the radars have been taken out systematically. If you are flying your planes with impunity, you have air superiority. And what you want is air supremacy. You want zero pushback from the forces you're fighting against. And it was hilarious the other day. Some Russian troll was telling me that Russia had air superiority. That it wasn't even that. It was something like Russia had complete air superiority. I was like, are you actually joking? Like, surely you don't really believe that. They can barely get close to the contact line. No, the airspace is completely contested. Russia have air advantage because they can use guided glide bombs, and they can get 50 to 70 kilometers from the front line to release those. But they can't do close air support without getting taken down, which is, low flying planes supporting your troops on the ground by, hitting with other munitions and so on and so forth. What the Israelis are doing are flying over Syria and then hammering Iran, and they're coming back without losing a single airplane because they have systematically taken out Iranian air defenses. And that then is incredibly important for them to be able to do whatever they want to do next, right? So Jay in Kiev says, imagine the thousands of lives saved in Ukraine if the four appeasers of the apocalypse allowed Ukrainians to do this to Russia. So the idea is, well, actually, if we allowed Ukraine to strike deep into Russia with their missiles, then actually this could have taken place. And Israel strike crippled Iran's missile production. You could have missile production in Russia and Shahid production in Russia be affected. So anyway, just sort of throw that one in. Don't forget, please help out with the NAFO campaign for 2 trucks. We have financed 1 truck, but obviously, as the excitement at the beginning then slows down, and we need to make sure that we get over the final few hurdles of not hurdles, but down the home straight and over the finish line for this. We are at about 32,000 euros, which is insane. Thank you so much. But we need to get to 38,000, and then that second truck will be funded. So please click on the link, help out with whatever you can and I'll do an update to this fundraiser, separate video update, and just give the props out to people who have been so incredible in helping. But thank you for those who have. You are legends. Please help out where you can if you haven't already. And if you can't afford to, then please spread the word, etc., etc. Anyway, thank you so much for your support. Take care, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon.